Hi guys, it's Natalie here, Only One United. Big debate tonight, away ends. We've seen it sort of bubbling up for a while. We saw an article by Paul who's on tonight. We've seen articles by Tom Gary. Rodney's obviously here, he's got his viewpoint on and off the pitch. Go and check that out. And obviously we've seen a survey by the FSA that they've come out and said 34% want it and 40%, but we'll get into that because I think there's a lot of people in here. Vicky, hiya. Karen, hi. Craig, this is the point. We're going to come on to it. Don't worry, mate. Stick around. But yeah, guys, get over to YouTube. If you're watching on Twitter, get over. Let's have the debate. It's a panel, and Stu's going to join us from Since 71, and he's got his point. But let me go back. Rodney, thanks for coming. Evening. How's it going? Tell us.
Not too bad. Not too bad. Taking a bit of a break from doing my stuff. I'm enjoying being on panels like this where I can sit back and watch someone else take control. So it's nice being a guest, really, because I don't have to worry and I can just think about the topic itself. So good. You?
Yeah, I'm doing good, and that's what this is about. I think I just want to have a debate. I just tried to get as many people in, and I saw Paul's article, and Paul linked it today, and we retweeted it. And I'd probably say, Paul, I'll come to you in a minute, but since myself, you're the most passionate person for away fans. So just tell people about yourself, Paul. How long you've been into women's football, and just welcome to the show. And if you want to kick us off, why are you so passionate?
Thanks, Natalie. Hi, Rodney. We've said already hi, but hey, everybody. I'm Paul. You might know me from yelling about Coventry United on Twitter and more the rest of women's football, because I'm a bit of a latecomer to women's football, I've got to admit, and that might kind of influence my view on away ends, because I come very much from watching the Sky Blues and a men's football background. Always watched the Lionesses and always watched the FA Cup final on TV and loved watching it. Then Coventry United went up into the Championship and were playing just down the road from my house, and they basically put a load of flyers out go and watch Liverpool in the much maligned Conti Cup. I slag off the Conti Cup, but if it wasn't for the Conti Cup, I probably wouldn't have gone first time round. And that led to, because I'm on a local radio station, that led to talking about them on the sports show more and more. And then eventually one game I just kind of mentioned I was there doing it, and the owners at the time, and one of the stewards at the time actually said, you should come and meet the owner, who were the old owners at the time. And they were like, do you want to start coming up and doing interviews and stuff? And I'm like, yes. And then the start of the last season, they said, do you want to do live games as opposed to just reports? And I went, yes, because it's always been my ambition to do it. I've done other sports, but I've never done football. And then we all know what happened this season. And if anything, the game, I hesitate to keep referring to that Watford game, but that was the first game Coventry United really took an away following. There were a couple of guys who kind of travelled on the coach, but for that game, that was the first game that about 3 or 4 coaches worth of Coventry United fans, a bunch of people who are the away fans, travelled down there. And I think that made it more special, because when that Molly Green goal went in, it wasn't just complete silence. They actually had someone to celebrate with. They could run over, celebrate with the fans. And I think that was the point that made me really decide, when I saw people talking about, we're not sure whether we need away ends. We don't want women football to be the same as men's, and home and away fans split up. That was the point where I went, no, let's hold the game back. This is what football is. This is what you need. And so all of that, and obviously Tom Gary talking about it and you talking about it, was kind of what inspired me to go on that rant disguised as an article.
No, but listen, you would have... I mean, Rodney, going back 2018 Championship year, Man United always took a following, didn't we? We always had our little bus, and then our bus turned into 2 buses, and now we've got a full 50-seater coach. And some places we've been welcomed with open arms, and some places it's been difficult, very difficult. And you know, I see Vicky here talking about Reading being the worst, and that's not slagging off Reading. I think they're a great club. I think the times when we have gone down to Reading before they were in the men's stadium, it was actually amazing. We were like standing at the front, Reading fans were behind us, and it was like it was two ends. It was like it was self-segregated in a way. But I feel like now we're going into men's stadiums and all this more, and I'm pro. Stu's joined now. I'm pro going into men's stadiums at the right time. But I think if you're going into men's stadiums, then you have to, that's where for me, there should be no debate when you're in a men's stadium, because when we were in Reading, I hated it. It was Reading fans to the left of me, Reading fans to the right of me. More Man United fans would come in and, you know, people were saying this is my seat, whereas Man United fans all bought them all scattered everywhere because there wasn't that place where you could just log in and say, this is where I want to sit with my fans. I saw a thread today. It was what's he called? Tim Stillman. And he's saying a lot of people don't know other people. Look at you, Paul. You're talking about you, one singular person, starting to go. And you might not know those 4 or 5 buses. And so you can still have that one place where you would buy a ticket and you would be with Coventry people, no matter when, where, who you know. And then that's how you build fan bases. I mean, Sporty Chat Box here is saying buying your ticket from your own club, and I think that's and I think everyone sort of wants that as well because it just makes it simpler. But Stu, welcome. Thank you for joining us. You know, here's another voice to the debate, I suppose. And with yourself, I think I'm more
Thank you for.
Go on.
Oh, hello. Yeah, thank you for being so patient and waiting for me. Apologies, bedtime duties called with a 2-year-old, and as you know, they can be unpredictable with their timings. So thank you for being patient. So where are we? Away ends. Am I right?
Yeah, and we're just gathering everyone's thoughts at the minute.
Is that where we're at? Away ends. It's a bit of a no-brainer. I very much sit in the middle of it with everyone because I tend to spend more time going to National League football games. So allocated seating isn't so much of an issue with many of the grounds being part mainly terrace with often less than 50% seating. So you've got the option to go and stand wherever you want. And it's your choice whether you want to move towards the more vocal support or whether you sit in more of a neutral sort of like family area. So I like having that option. I do think the biggest issue with it is the fact that a lot of people have to go to opposition teams' websites and sign up as a member for a lot of them in order to get their tickets. And that's not the best way to do it. It's quite simple. Offer the away tickets, offer home tickets, and if you want, you could offer neutral. I personally quite like with just designating behind the goals potentially. That seems to be where most of the sort of the ultras, as it were, tend to gravitate towards in any stadium that I've ever tended to be in. So therefore, behind both goals, one designated for the away, one designated for the home, and then you've got potentially the sides for anyone that's not so fast. And whether they're allocated, I guess it really depends on the ground. If you're looking at the LSV, then you buy your ticket for the block. You've got terraced area, so they're going to cap it via the numbers that they can have safely stand in that. So I want to go and sit with the away fans, I can go do that. But actually, I think that I also should have the freedom to move around the ground if I want. That's just my area. Perhaps you could simply just have a steward, like you would do when you're going into a bar or a pub, a little ticker, just making sure that there's even number in if you have one way out. It's a little bit of work, but it's an easy workaround, which is going to build atmosphere. Or you can be super strict and say, nah, you're in that section, stay in that section, which I also wouldn't argue against. But in summary, just give people the options.
Yeah. I mean, Paul, do you want to touch on your article a bit? Because I know it got a bit of feedback, didn't it? Where it was people didn't really agree. I think when you were saying, go on.
Well, I think I probably earned a bit of that because I was a bit scathing of certain sections of the women's football fan base and the mentality. Because I know what else sparked it off, and I remember you talking about this as well. And Rodney, you might have mentioned this because it was just after Spurs versus Arsenal, and there have been some fans talking about how because Spurs and Arsenal fans are gone, whenever Arsenal players had taken a corner, they've been booed or something, or Spurs players have been booed, and we don't want that coming over from men's football. And I kind of sat there looking at it going, really? What do you want women's football to be? And then I kind of went on a bit of a rant about how they're, as an outsider coming into women's football and coming from a culture where it's massively, massively tribal, as you all know yourselves, presumably. They're in Coventry, for example, if Leicester come here, then don't go into the city centre unless you go into the game, or at least don't go into the city centre wearing a Leicester shirt because it probably won't go down very well. And obviously, every team has their rivals. And I can't imagine. And then when Coventry played Leicester in the Championship as well, and I was watching it, and it had that little extra edge to it because it was Leicester. And I know we've talked about it, and Leicester fans have seen. We'll keep an eye out to see if we play Coventry in the cup next season, just because it's a local rivalry. And for women's football fans to say, "Oh, we don't want that," you're basically telling people, "Don't be football fans." You cannot. I think football is inherently tribal. Like you say, it's knowing people, it's wearing the same shirts, it's doing the songs, it's whatever else. And it's you against them. And if you're going to turn around and say, right, you can't express any of that, you're basically going to kill any idea of a sport. You may as well turn it into a day out and have everybody clapping. And basically, the pushback I got from people was, we like to go and see our friends. And I'm like, fine, go and see them after the game. For that 90 minutes, they're the other team. And I think I don't know whether it exactly put some people's noses out of joint a bit, but I think it's like you say, it just isn't really the culture in women's football yet. It's still developing its fan culture. And I think the best way to do that is to have fans packed together and have away ends and have songs and develop those rivalries. And
Paul,
women's football seems scared of it.
Yeah, you're speaking my language, Paul, because this is what I came in and sort of was like. And I suppose I want to come on to Rodney. You know what it was like when we would go into these games. We turned up in our numbers. We turned up singing. Where Man United will do what we want. Got more flags than you've got fans, and most times we did in a way. And now I do see more people turning up, singing back, and that kind of thing. But there is that kind of what Paul talks about, that kind of, this is not how it's done here, and we want it different from the men's game. But I still think it is different from the men's game in that, it's not that kind of, well, it isn't that tribal, but it is, I do think, I agree with Paul when he does say it is inherently tribal. I mean, what's your views when you hear him say things like that, Rodney?
Well, it's, Paul and I, we start from the same page in terms of we're new to women's football. Me roughly about 3 years, maybe 3 to 4 years. So for all those fans who would go to a game and say they enjoy the day out, they enjoy being with their friends and watching the game, the tribal aspect is not the first thing on their mind. They go there for a reason. But because we have a history of coming to with the women's game, we come from a history of where it is tribal, we expect the same. So I don't necessarily say that, having a segregated an end for away fans is a bad thing. But when I was thinking about tonight's discussion, I thought, who's driving the question? It's those that want it, that need the, because you want to create an atmosphere. Generally, that's what you're saying. You don't want to go to the games. You don't want it to be quiet. You don't want it to be sanitized, because all of the things that you want is part of the day out. But there are those fans who go to games that have their routine in terms of they want to go to the game. And as Paul's acknowledged, he got heat from his article that they enjoy seeing their friends. So that's part of their day out. So I'm neither for it or against it. But what I will say is that the women's game is definitely different. It's definitely growing in its own way and at its own pace, because we could talk about a number of other things, in terms of what we would like to see for the women's game. But in terms of the actual segregation for fans that are traveling, is probably more pertinent for Manchester United fans because you've got the numbers. It might be the same at some point for Chelsea fans or Man City fans, Leicester, Coventry. But it's dependent on who's asking the question. Say, for example, in the Championship, I was on another pod discussion not too long ago, and there was mention of London City Lionesses, and the joke was they've got no fans. Right, that was the joke. They've got no fans where they're situated. They've got no connection. They've got a nice owner. They're going about their business and doing their thing. And that's the thing about women's football. At every point of the development, it's going to be a question where we want more than we have. At the moment, for this discussion, we want away ends. We want segregation for traveling fans. But that's not always going to be the same discussion for teams that don't have fans, or they don't have the same number of traveling fans. So they may look at this and think this isn't relevant to us. When you come to our ground, you just sit where you can, or as Stuart says, you stand around the side of the pitch. That's it. So I generally think that this conversation is almost like 2 or 3 years ahead of its time. The numbers aren't there yet. But what I think is that for one particular team, the numbers are there, the numbers are growing, but it's not replicated throughout the WSL or the Championship. But it might be in the National League, because we're not. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, I understand, and I don't think it is there yet for the Championship. I'm not going to lie. And I think this is a WSL. I'm sorry, but I think it is a WSL chat because I do think the numbers there are growing. Leicester are taking more. I know Everton talked about how they, even though they only took a couple, they had an away end for Man United and they said they loved it. Then they went to Brighton and they stood behind one goal and then it started mingling, but they just said they preferred it when it was like their end kind of thing. And yeah, maybe Everton, Brighton isn't going to sell out like, Kings Meadow did at the end of the season when Man United came, But I think definitely for WSL, it should be trialed because, like you say, the question is there. People are asking, people want it. And, even though 30%, 34% was sort of when the larger majority was against it, I think someone said to me, you can't ignore that 30%. That's a third. I don't think we're at a point in women's football where we can ignore what like people like that want. I mean, Craig's saying we're the sort of newcomers maybe. But we're sort of growing into the majority where there's a lot of people that watch a men's team but watch a women's team as well. And I feel like if people are casually watching the women's game, surely you want them to have the same experiences that they do have at the men's stadium in a way, because that will, for me, like you say, raise the atmosphere, entice people in. I know Stuart wants to talk. I'm sorry, I just jumped over it if I've jumped over your point, but go on.
No. It's all good. It's all good. I think we've all covered it quite well. It's really difficult when you talk about building atmosphere because if you don't let it grow organically, it's gonna be fake. That's when you're gonna see. I've been to quite a few sports in America, and that is the most manufactured atmosphere that you'll ever find. It's great. I enjoyed every single basketball, baseball, NFL, ice hockey game I ever went to, but it just felt really manufactured, and you don't get that in men's football, and you don't get that in women's football. I've been an advocate for pushing the game to develop and grow, but I do think there needs to be a balance. I think, like you said, from a WSL perspective, there needs to be home and away ends offered. As I say, behind the goals, you can go through your own club's website, so you don't have to be getting spam emails from all your opposition clubs all the time. And then you can have general sale in one side section or both side sections if there's enough argument for it. I'm a big advocate that I believe that all women's WSL games should be played in the men's stadiums. I know that that's a whole massive topic and I completely understand the arguments for and against it, but I just think that should be part of it. And it also depends how you want to grow the women's game. And there isn't one fix for everybody. Like Everton and Birmingham, for example, were relatively low attendances, if we're being brutally honest. So it's going to be very difficult to build that sort of atmosphere without your quick fix of bringing the men's fans over. If you want to bring the men's fans over, then you have to make it accessible to them in the first instance, and a lot of clubs don't. They're still only giving a little bit of advertisement. They're not putting it at the forefront where they really could or really should. So you are also going to get elements of the men's game which aren't as appealing. I like to think of women's football as pantomime. So I completely agree that there should be the atmosphere. Booing someone taking a corner, yeah, it's brilliant. It should be pantomime. It should be a bit of fun. It shouldn't be abusive and nasty. That's when I get a little bit more uncomfortable. I'm from Portsmouth. I tend to go watch a lot of Portsmouth women games, and there's a good atmosphere. They have a good crowd. Portsmouth men's team historically have a fantastic support, home and away, even throughout their time in the Premiership, the Championship, and League One, and they do get good crowds in the hundreds. But you can tell quite clearly when a group of 5 to 15 have come from the men's game for when the Southampton games are on, because it just raises that extra level where you do get that tribalism. And actually, it works. It's good. It does bring an atmosphere. Southampton won the National League title against Portsmouth at St Mary's with a crowd of 5,000, and it was fantastic. It was a really good atmosphere. I know that you wouldn't get that for every single game, but you've got to start somewhere. This is why I think have every game at St Mary's. You've got 5,000 for a big game. Okay, they've just gone up into a bigger division. If you give them a product in the facilities and the environment that they deserve, more people will come back. Like, I strongly believe that a lot of those Southampton fans that came to the St Mary's that day would be more than likely retained if the next match was at St Mary's. So if you're only going to put 3 or 4 games a season on at your men's club, then you're probably not going to be retaining as many fans through the turnstiles as you probably like. And where Southampton play their games, it's a lovely little stadium, probably about 15, 20-minute drive outside of the city. Parking is awful if you don't get there early. But it's only awful because the stadium doesn't have the capacity to have many people that aren't car sharing. So I don't know the specifics, but I would guesstimate that you could probably get 150, maybe 250 cars there at most. And the reality is, even with people in multiple cars, you're only going to get 300-400 there. So you're automatically limiting yourself. So we want the game to grow. So let's get them at these big stadiums. Let's start to build these atmospheres. But if we are going for the quick fix of getting men's fans over, then we do either have to accept that that's going to bring certain elements that we don't like, or we've got to police it. The biggest example most recently was the Wolverhampton Wanderers game against West Bromwich Albion, where the West Brom fans were giving quite a lot of abuse to Maz Gauntlet, making fun of her size. She answered it the best way by scoring a fantastic goal, and I think it was a 4-0. It was a comfortable win. Nick will be on at me later for not knowing the exact scoreline, but it was a comfortable win. But it got nasty enough that the players and the management of both sides felt they needed to come out and criticise those fans. That needs to be policed. I don't expect fans to go do it, because let's face it, if you've got a group of anything from 10 to 50 guys or girls that are there being abusive and taking it across the line, not very many of us are going to go into the bear pit. But that's when maybe there's an argument, that's something we don't talk about very much with of stewarding, when actually they should be coming and saying, actually, that if you do this, you're out. We talk about this in the men's game. It's like, oh, if you hear abuse, I know that in the men's game, they generally just talk about if it's sort of homophobic or racial abuse. But realistically, if you're talking about abuse and violence and that sort of thing, then actually, do you know what? I don't really want to listen to it. There's what is it? It says you're going home in a ambulance. That's one you hear at certain grounds. I'm like, I don't like that. That's not banter. That's just a bit too much. And I'm not a huge fan of that. And I think if that with the women's game, I would like us to police it a little bit more. And that's when you need to get stewards in, trained, empowered, paid, not necessarily volunteers. So actually then we can go and we can manage it. And if the fans that come in taking it too far, out you go. They won't come back, but we don't want them back. If they think, oh, okay, maybe not. Oh, okay, I'm a respectable bank manager or doctor by day, so maybe I need to stop with the mob mentality and change the way you do things. But I think it's always going to be different for every single club. There's not one size fits all. But I think these conversations are brilliant. And ultimately, I don't see anyone that has any real opposition to it moving forward, it developing and progressing. But let's make sure it's done organically and not trying to force it.
Yeah, well, this is where then I suppose I want to talk and bring in Paul, bring in what you've just said about abuse and that kind of thing. And I think here Karen said something, people link tribal to abuse. You know, I think like what you said about pantomime. And when Alex Greenwood comes to Man United, she gets booed. Booed. Why? I mean, they always read out, they say Alex Greenwood, former captain, and it just gets booed. And I remember there was this one game we played and she walked into the corner, and I think it was in the night game, it's the Conti Cup, she walked into the corner with the ball, and it sounds really mad, but it like inspires you. I could hear it, I could feel it, I could feel like that. It's hard to say, but that passion, the anger towards her, and she took the corner and it went out. And I think that the fact that she walked into that corner with the ball, and it's strange because, like you said, you don't want that booing, but then you're saying, it's conversations that we need to talk about, isn't it? Because for me, I think we need that. I want that when Liverpool come. I remember when Liverpool came and everyone was, the one thing that I think was wrong, and I think everyone said it's wrong, when someone started to sing Only the Victim. But I think everything else was bang on, and I think they were getting booed. This one was getting called a reject and talking about how much we hate Liverpool, and I loved it. I thought it was amazing. And some of the players come out, it was great. That's what, this is what it is, Man United, Liverpool. But then you do get the same kind of fans that are saying, this is not women's football. And I don't know who wants to come in on it, but go on, Stu. Yeah, you again.
Just very, very briefly, because I think Alex Greenwood is a great case study. The 2 points with her is, I think people also need to remember the way that football is. She left Man United to go to Lyon. Most players would leave Man United to go to Lyon. A lot of players would leave Chelsea to go to Lyon. A lot of players would go from Arsenal to go to Lyon, because at that time they were just absolutely smashing it in Europe, and they did it again this year. So I think people need to add a little bit of perspective. But on a match day, what you described there, yeah, it is good. It does grab of atmosphere. The reality is Greenwood probably relishes it a little bit and will raise their game. What I don't like is when you get people out of the confines of a stadium in a match day carrying stuff like that on. We've all seen it. People, and something with Alex Greenwood on, just loads of snake emojis. That's just it's for me, it's immature. For me, it's dumb, and for me, there's no need for it, because it just makes you look more of an idiot than anything else, because actually you don't know the context behind it. And this is where that pantomime element comes in for me. By all means, boo. I remember the Man United Reading FA Cup game. Would have been about 4 years ago, I think. And the Barmy Army were fantastic. They created the atmosphere. They were solely responsible for the atmosphere. But I can't remember who it was. It might have been potentially Remy Allen scored a goal. It was at the end where the United fans were congregated, and as she ran past, she gave it the arms, ran past, and it was a bit of fun. She gave it, she took it, and that's how it should be. After the match, if Remy was walking to her car, I wouldn't have expected any of those fans to then be abusive or anything like that, because it's done. You're out of the stadium. You act like normal, civilized, grown-up respectful people and remember for what it is. It's a sport, and it is a sport first and foremost. And it's not like these are multi-millionaires that some people might argue, oh, they can afford to take it a little bit. They can afford the best therapists and sports science support. These are people like you and I. Like, we arguably, some of us in our day jobs probably get paid more than some professional footballers in the WSL. Yet none of us would stand for abuse in the workplace, or especially outside of the workplace. So these players shouldn't. And as I say, Alex Greenwood probably relishes the banter. I hate the word banter, but actually it's really relevant in this discussion. Like, don't take it too far. Don't take it too far. And once the game's done, that's done. You should be a grown-up human being about it all.
Yeah. Well, can I just then touch, I suppose, and say, but people then do see, even though you're saying it's banter and pantomime, people do take offence, and that's where I think, I don't know. I mean, Rodney, what do you think? Because obviously, you've seen her, and then now, she comes every game, she gets booed. It is that home and away, they cheer her, we boo her. It's part of it, but then people see that as abuse, and
I mean,
for me,
I mean, there's a lot of things that have been said that I agree with, and I'm looking at the comments as well. And what Stuart mentioned about he wouldn't expect players to take any kind of abuse, or kind of use abuse as the word, once the game is finished after the stadium. And I think someone said, and I think once after the whistle's blown, it's over. And in football, it's never over when someone has a particular point of view. It's very difficult in life to have an idea that's wrong and then say you're not going to think about it anymore. Once you've had the idea, it's there. That's it. You don't remove it and say, I'm going to be horrible to that person up until that point, and then I'm going to stop.
Yeah.
Because no one really operates that way. No one really says, I'm only going to be horrible between 3 and 4:30. It doesn't
this
work.
Is where, as well, Rodney, I think, and I disagree with Stuart in that. For example, if we look at Georgia Stanway, she did that tackle. It was a horror tackle on Leah Galton, and everyone went in, and then they reposted it, didn't they? And they said, "Oh, look at this," and then everyone says, "Oh, who the?" Because I think when we saw it in real time, we didn't even realize how bad it was. And then obviously we saw it again, reposted, slowed down, zoomed in, and everyone's like, chop her, let's try to chop her down. And a lot of the tweets I saw of that were just sort of basically like that. Red card, oh, she's chopping her down, she can't play football like that. And then next minute that was come out as abuse. And I thought, all right, well, what was the abuse? Oh, someone said to me about getting pregnant. And I was thinking, What? What's that? That's the two aren't getting. But then sometimes I think, is it over egged as abuse? I don't know, because I don't know what she was specifically sent in her DMs. But I can just say that what I saw on social media was just people saying that's a dirty tackle. Potentially she's a dirty player. She's done it before, and then the next minute it was all this, oh, she's been abused. And I thought, okay, so I get where you're coming from, Rodney. It's not just suddenly removed, and it's not just suddenly, oh, now I like Alex because the whistle's over. No, it's still, you left us, that kind of, how can you say? I'm not rushing to get her.
Betray.
Yeah,
I'm not rushing out the betrayal.
Yeah, I'm not rushing out the stadium to go, oh, Alex, Simon. And that's what I don't understand as well. But then that is women's football. That's what people are doing. People are booing her, then rushing to get her to sign your T-shirt. That's what I don't understand as well. I'm not rushing to her to sign a T-shirt. If I saw her in the street, I'd walk past her. Whereas I used to probably see her in the street and we used to walk up to each other and chat. Well, it's
different now.
Different now. But that's the way it is.
Yeah. Do you know what? I want to ask. I know this is not my thing. It's really funny the way things have come round to the fans and just basically how we treat the players. And this is an offshoot from like the away end, and it's basically it's about the atmosphere. And I know that you mentioned, because I've got an example to come back to later on, But it was when Paul started talking and he said about Coventry, Leicester, and obviously Coventry, we know they're still here. You know, I'm interested to know now because they will have fans that are traveling. I want to know what he thinks about an away end when they travel down to clubs like Charlton, who don't necessarily have the biggest stand and they're stood round the pitch. Or when you go to London City Lionesses and people will joke that they don't have fans. I mean, what are Coventry going to do to engage with those clubs about having a special dedicated away end for Coventry fans?
Well, it's weird. It's weird because the Butts Park Arena doesn't have stands behind the goal. It's got one stand, which is a fantastic start for us giving us an away end. But I always remember when, like for the Championship, when you guys said it's a WSL conversation, I don't think it is. I think it's a Championship and I think it's a National League conversation because, like Stu says, with the 5,000 people between Southampton and Portsmouth, Southampton now coming up to the Championship with a rumoured £3 million budget. That was something I heard the other day, and I'm like, you could say buying the league, but we won't say that. That's a separate debate. But in terms of like away ends, you've got lower league clubs like Clapton as well, who we became familiar with through their FA Cup run, who are well supported. And I think you'll get at places like London City, perhaps, or at places like the Oakwood, although I wish Charlton played at the Valley. Because Oakwood is, in my opinion, not a Championship ground, really. But I think if you put Coventry fans travelled down there, I think they naturally congregate behind an end. And I think to say you can't do that, or we should find ways not to do that, even if it's just clubs say, right, okay, at Oakwood, away fans stand behind the goal away to the right or something if they want to congregate. This is
raining.
If it's raining, then they're screwed in Oakwood because there's hardly any roofs in there anywhere, to be honest. But that place is literally a social club. But like when I look at most Championship grounds, they have the facilities where fans can congregate. Like even London City Lionesses, there's all the joke about them not having away fans, and to be honest, they don't. They do have a massive like support team that travel up, but they don't make enough noise for a whole load of fans. But they don't have many fans yet. But I think the only way you're going to get that, and the only way you're going to get the passionate support, is by having the facility if fans want to travel. Because, you know, Man United, they're known for their flags at away games, but that's all come from their home end at the Leigh Sports Village and the massive wall of flags. Crystal Palace have got a massive wall of flags at what they basically said is their home end. And I think people, like we had earlier in the chat, someone said that people think that tribal automatically means abusive. And I think another thing that some people are perhaps reacting against is when you're saying segregated ends, that isn't, like we're saying, it's not, there's a massive wall down the middle of the pitch. There's not like fences. It's literally just, here is the end that away fans can stand at if they want to congregate. And you can do that at most grounds. You can do that at National League grounds. You can just make it a thing whenever away fans come to the ground. I'll just say, you know, if you want, away fans usually stand down that end. And that builds and builds and builds. And it spreads until eventually people just naturally, organically build it. And then I can see Craig talking about the ultras in the NWSL. You know, and you look at European football, you look at the PSG Ultras, you look at Lyon, you look at Wolfsburg, and then you look at the NWSL where people are annoyed at Man United fans getting annoyed at Georgia Stanway putting in a 2-footer because apparently it might offend her. And it's like, we need to grow up. English women's football needs to grow up. It's patronising to the players to turn around and say, we want to be all friendly. It's elite sport. You know, we were talking about Alex Greenwood earlier. And we're all saying she probably loves it. So why are we then turning around and going, we're not going to allow stuff like this to congregate? And on the rivalry thing, it's weird because me being a Coventry fan, Coventry boy, born and bred, Shannon O'Brien, one of my favourite players for Coventry, the first player that I loved. She moved to Leicester. If the argument is as soon as people move, you turn on them and forget about them and stuff, I'd hate her now. But I've kept talking about her. You know, I keep supporting her. She's given me one of her shirts, which I was absolutely, you know, over the moon about. And I think we're dealing with a level of engagement with women's football from like a higher level. People aren't going there, and it's not defining their whole week. You know, they're not putting their whole self-worth in whether or not Man United women or Chelsea women or whatever else win. They're going because they love the club, but they also love watching the players play, and they feel a connection. And I think that's
Bless you.
I think that's the way that we need to go. And I think I agree when people turn around and say, you know, with abuse and stuff, and people have said, well, what's your line with abuse and banter and whatever else? My line is, if you wouldn't say it to the players, if you wouldn't say it to the player's face on a night out when you're gently taking the mickey, or if you wouldn't say it to them at park football, don't say it to them. You know, because if a player's running down the wing and is rubbish and I turn around and go, watch yourself, that was a rubbish pass, that's nothing. If I turn around and I'm insulting her looks or I'm whatever else, then that's another level. And I think I agree with Stu that we need to kind of set that level. But I think because women's football is much newer and because of the way that fan culture is development, the responsibility, if you like, is on the fans to set it and turn around and go, right, the level here is, for example, for Georgia Stanway, the level for Georgia Stanway for me would be, I'll take the mick out of her all the time because I think she puts in two-footed tackles and I think she can be a liability. But I wouldn't, you know, that would be my level. It's like, oh, she loses her head sometimes. It wouldn't be, I hope she gets this, that, and the other happen. You know, because I guarantee from what I've heard from players, and I'm sure you'll say this, Nat, you'll say this, Stu, you'll say this, Rodney, what fans say in the stands and what you know, the kind of talk that fans think is abusive and tribal is nothing compared to what gets said on the benches. And I think that's the same with a lot of sports. And I think to pretend otherwise and to pretend that football doesn't cause those emotions where you really do despise the opposition and you really want to give them some stick within boundaries, I think is doing the players themselves a disservice because they're elite athletes. They can deal with it. And, of course, like Maz Gauntlet, they have the satisfaction of sticking one into the top corner and then running down in front of the fans giving them stick as well. So you get that as well. I told you I'd get a bit ranty.
Chef's kiss. That's what I say to that. Chef's kiss. That is exactly. That is. I mean, I can't remember if you remember, Rodney, but when we got beat by Durham,
oh gosh,
I didn't even know who Durham were. But this girl, she ran past me. She did all this, and next minute, bang! I don't like Durham.
I remember.
And I went to Sheffield, and I said, "You're not singing anymore, are you?" You know, and that's what it is. Stop giving it back. And then she messaged me. I can't even remember which one it is. Beth Heppel. Don't like her. You ask anyone back then, they don't like her. Not like, oh, personally, I don't know the girl. Yeah, of course I don't know the girl, but I have that mutual respect in that, yes, she's a footballer, much respect, but when we play Durham, I'm like, oh, there's that Beth Heppel, you know? She's the one who did that. You know, and I just feel like what Paul was saying, you don't really respect the players then if you think, I get where he's coming from. If you can't, like I saw someone today saying, women's football, we need to be a bit more critical in that not everyone's perfect, but all you see is positive. And in the minute anyone says, and I think it is more to do with like player stands and you can't say anything bad about someone. I mean, I remember when we played Liverpool and there was behind closed doors and I said, oh, Kristen Press should have passed instead of taking the shot and all this. And next minute everyone was saying, I hate her. And yeah, that's over the top. That's like Stan levels. But I don't know. I do think there needs to be some kind of something where, you can sort of say something, you know, because like Lanzel's saying here, If I've put it on, yeah, United, they shouldn't. I mean, they can move, but I think now with Alex Greenwood, what has happened, they might think twice. And people are like, oh, that's horrible. They shouldn't be able to look at what is going on. City are probably paying more doing this, and yeah, they should be able to move. And yeah, they should be able to move. No one's got a gun to the head saying don't, but I think there's that understanding that you wouldn't, because you know what's going to come if you get, and whether that's bad or right or wrong. Yeah, and I've seen it even now with Leaky Martins, the way that she left Barca and she got, they were, you don't like snake emojis, go and look at her posts. Go and look.
That's my level, right? If people would say that's what my level for like opposition players is, I think Leaky Martins is a fine example of that, because Barca fans and Man City fans and sections, it is the big club fan bases. They seem to be the toxic ones. It's not the National League clubs. It's not the Championship clubs who are the ones where you're risking people turning up and hurling abuse. It's these big clubs, I think, because you've got loads of people who don't live anywhere near the grounds in question, but support the teams and think they have ownership over these players. And when Leaky Martins decides, right, I'm moving, suddenly she's getting called a prostitute in Spanish, and that's the level where I think fans have the responsibility to turn around and go, behave, we're better than that. And I think that's the only way. I think self-policing is the key thing here, and I think it needs influential figures in the women's game, of which you three might be in some form or one form or another.
Speak to yourself.
No, I wasn't going to accept that. You three have far more like settled in the game, as it were. But in terms of like, I think it needs people like that to kind of set the boundaries and go, right, okay. If it's a tasty atmosphere, if it's like the PSG ultras, big that up and go, this is awesome. If you hear stuff like Maz Gauntlet, if everyone's turning around and going, no, that's rubbish, then I think eventually by repetition, people might start going, right, okay, we know roughly where the line is. PSG ultras is good. If we go beyond that, we start abusing players, we're going to get ostracized. And people don't want that. Women's football is the whole point of it. Like we've been saying, it's welcoming. People want to be part of a community. And if the community basically turns around and says, if you cross this line, we will kick you out, that's what needs to happen.
Yeah, go on, Stu. I know you wanted to follow. I just want to touch here quickly. Barcelona fans, they probably have no chill on social media, but then everyone's saying they're the best thing since sliced bread when the new camp sold out. So I think people equate the two too quickly, if you get what I mean. But go on, Paul. No, Stu, sorry.
That's all right. It was just going to be sort of very brief. I think if you have Harry's boy comment there, it's very difficult to just say, oh, they can't go to that club, because we all know the fact that Alicia Russo has rejected a contract extension tells you that not everything is right behind the scenes. And if Man City come in and offer double her wages, she's going to look at that. She's going to think, well, I've just bought a house potentially in Manchester. I could double my money. I can be in a club that's going to give me the environment and the resources to develop as a player. They're going to do that. I think it's very different when you're Steven Gerrard and you're a multi-millionaire. You can have that option, but these players don't. And I think sometimes people have got to remember that, or at least respect it. And that's the thing with Alex Greenwood and like Leaky Martins. They made a footballing decision that was also based on a career. And each and every single one of us would probably work for a rival company that raised our wages and potentially gave us more benefits, or a nicer office or company car. Everyone would do it. Everyone in the comments, they would all do it. If it's right, what these players need to challenge, and Natalie will know more about this, it's the sort of thing that we were saying a couple of years ago, that Man United have got to get the training facilities right. They've got to get the environment correct. But I think fans have just got to respect the players' decisions a little bit. I'm not saying that you can't abuse them. Well, that's not, abuse is the wrong word. I'm not saying that you can't give them stick. I'm not saying that you can't give them stick. Like Alex Greenwood, give her stick. Martha Harris, if she signs for Liverpool, give her stick. Alika Martins, when she comes back, give her stick. But calling her a prostitute online, just what sane, reasonable person thinks that that's acceptable? You can say good riddance. It's just, yeah.
Can I just say though about this point from Harry? I had Emma Sanders on a while back, and we were talking about going to Barca, and Chelsea were I think Chelsea made the biggest offer, and I said to her, what's going on? This kind of thing. When it was this, I can't even remember, some day in Spain, and I said, they sit and they say all these kind of things, and then it just turns like the men in a way, because how can Alessia sit and say they're the best fans, and then sit and turn around? So I spoke to and say, just like, I get it, it's a football decision, but for me, I think I asked Emma, does it come into play with players thinking these things, thinking about the fans? And she said the first time that she's ever seen sort of like, it's weird. She said Chelsea, they'd been there a long time. They got flowers, they got this, they got that. And she said she'd never seen that before in a women's game. So there is this kind of loyalty that is sort of coming in. And maybe in a way, she's saying she doesn't think people are going to make those moves anymore because that loyalty is there. Whereas you look at like Lucy Bronze Greenwood, and I saw Vic saying something, she's going to do the quadruple. Should have played for everyone. But, Greenwood, Bronze said, I'm not going to play in the WSL. I'm sure she would have had an offer, because I'm not telling me that Chelsea wouldn't have taken her, Arsenal probably would have taken her. But she says, out of respect for City fans and all that, I'm not going to. Whether she had that offer, obviously Barcelona was the best offering in, but I'm sure she had WSL offers, Lucy. But if
she says that, she's playing to her audience. Hence why you see fans kiss the badge for different clubs, because it's like saying, "Oh, you're the best girlfriend I've ever had because you're my current one." Well, they might be, but also that doesn't mean that your last ones you can't have affection for or can't think fondly of. Oh, I could have gone to them, but I chose not to. No, yes, you maybe could have done. I get that. But you're also scoring a few points with your old fan base, so they don't call you a snake online for jumping ship and going to Barcelona.
Well, the thing is, though, that is where it is at now.
She's saving herself.
And I think this is where it's at. We're at a point where it's not the majority of fans. I mean, I saw maybe like you've watched it longer than me, Stuart, and the majority of fans aren't. I think when Man United came in, that's sort of when it changed. And I think a lot of fans came in at that point when they were fans of the men's team. And I feel like now you are showing it on Sky Sports. I think people need to realise that the majority of fans are going to be men's fans, basically. It's going to be people coming in new, and all those people that are new now are going to be men's fans. And with the teams going professional, that's what I can see happening. And I know and I don't know what Rodney thinks about that, but I definitely do think that, I know there was that tweet that what Paul said about Spurs fans being booed, and in it said, we don't have to just be like men's fans. It doesn't always have to be men's fans. There's more fans that aren't men's fans. And I think there will be fans. I know fans that have come in and started to watch Man United and they never really watched football before. And I do think you will get those people. But I think the large majority will now be men's fans because it's on Sky, it's thingy. That's the way they're pushing it. They're doing all these kind of same things, ref watch, all this, talking about that. It's transfers, deadline day. It's going to be, men's fans. And I just think that when Man United came in, it was very much anti-men's fans. But now I feel like that's your audience, really. And if anyone wants to jump in, Rodney, I wanna hear your points.
No. I just want to say, I mean, all really good points, and it kind of made me think. Well, our discussion was about away ends or segregation ends for fans, and we've kind of moved to talk about how fans interact with players and what that might mean for players on the pitch, and the emotion and the relationships that fans have with players that move to clubs or rival clubs, or what players say that they, or where they won't go to because of their support for the team they're leaving. You know, in my mind, I'm thinking, do all of these things then prohibit a segregated area? If we by default have come down this path and said, well, this is what we want. We want to have away ends. We want this. We want the atmosphere. We want the rivalry. But a byproduct of that is this. We are going to boo players. We are going to do this. And just in our own little microcosm of a discussion, we've talked about the abuse that players get online if they move. As Stuart has said, they're in no way, shape, or form have the same financial clout as the men. The decisions they make, which could, you know, secure their mortgage, for, you know, payments for the next 2 or 3 years, because they might go to a rival team, you know, from United to City, etc., or for United to Chelsea. Those things come into consideration. And if the powers that be, say for example the FA or Barclays, look at it and think, you know what, we're listening to this conversation, we think, do we really want away ends because we've got to protect our product? Or do they see it as, like, you know, the end result of what they want? So they're going to say, we'll give them the away ends. We will do that for them, but we know where it's going to go. We know where, and I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, we have naturally come down this path about what might happen when we have, and someone says, you know, being tribal is not necessarily a bad thing, but by default, we want the pantomime. Someone's going to boo someone. Someone's going to say something. You're going to remember someone. You're going to call someone something because they didn't pass the ball very well. You're going to use particular language, however funny it is, to get your point across as a fan. And I you know, as I said to you at the beginning, that I'm not either for or against away ends. I just want to know who's asking the question. And if it's away fans asking the question, what do the clubs think about it? And with that, I'll be very interested to see what Barclays do now, since it's now the Barclays WSL and the Barclays Women's Championship, what they do in terms of coordinating ticket sales when big fixtures are happening, like Man United Chelsea or Man United Arsenal, Man United City, or if it's the Championship and they look at the 2 biggest teams at the top and think, can we make sure that those teams have got segregated away ends? Can we make sure that the tickets and the seats are in the same place for their traveling fans? Can we do a reconnaissance, you know, in terms of the ask them how many of their fans are traveling so that we can get things prepared for them? Are they going to do all of those things? And I don't know if the game is at that point, because as I said earlier, this conversation is 2-3 years ahead of its time because of the fan numbers. And if we're talking about away ends, and this is me thinking, I'm trying to think, okay, Barmy Army, great support, growing. Newcastle, how many fans? They're 22,000, 4th tier. Imagine if Barclays said, we're going to do a particular fixture. We're going to make sure that there are away ends for this fixture alone, and they get it right. Just for one game. Doesn't matter what the game is. And they say, we're trialing it. Because we all know that if we could have this conversation next month, Christmas, and still ask for segregation and still ask for away ends, and nothing will really be done because they don't have an actual handle on what's going on club by club. So again, I'm still sitting there thinking, I don't know whether I'm for it or against it. I like to sit in the neutral zone and actually sit down and watch the game. And I've been in the Barmy Army end. I know what it sounds like. It's loud. My ears. I'm delicate.
Well, I think that's what a point that we went through straight at the start, and we were saying it before, and Craig said, you know, home, away, neutral. But I just want to bring in Paul now. I suppose your thoughts. I agree with what Rodney said. We started off talking about away ends, and we've just sort of naturally gone into all these things. But I think that's how it links, because people are, you know, are against it, are obviously seeing it as, it starts as away ends and it ends up with Leaky Martins being called a prostitute, which in a way is stupid, but you could reach that far in a way. So go on, I just want to know your points, Paul.
Then you get with Leaky Martins. The last thing on that, you get the hypocrisy of the same media going, Barca are the best fans in the world, look at their 90,000, and then they do that. So, and Newcastle is a whole different debate with the women's team, with all the situation with ownership and stuff like that. But I think if I was making one argument for away ends, I'd use one goal in particular and the footage of one goal in particular, and it's Erin Cuthbert's goal for Chelsea in the FA Cup, in the last FA Cup final. Now you tell me, right, in the WSL stadium with mixed ends and hardly anyone behind that goal, she scores that, and everyone goes, great goal. She scores that from 25 yards and then goes herring towards a massed wall of blue behind the goal of Chelsea fans going absolutely mad. And if you're a broadcaster, if you're a neutral fan, if you're somebody looking for the product, you see that and go, flipping heck. And that's I think the marketing of women's football is wrong at this point, because they're still trying to make it all, it's all about inspiring the kids and it's all about role models and all that sort of stuff. And yes, it is. But now we need to go into these are professional athletes. These, you need it's like they want to take the emotion almost out of women's football unless it's very carefully prescribed. And I think that not allowing fans to group and express that will do that, because it kind of, people have said if they're in mixed groups, or in this being in mixed groups, if your team scores and you're surrounded by 30 fans of the opposite team, you're not going to cheer, are you? And then it takes away from that experience. All the people saying, it takes a bit away from my experience if Alex Greenwood goes to take a corner and I hear someone go, you went for the money. That takes away from my experience as a Man City fan. But and you're a Man United fan surrounded by 30 Man City fans, and Leslie Russo cracks in a cracker, and you can't do anything because you're worried that they'll tell you off for celebrating. Which is the greater evil? Is it a few people potentially being a bit annoyed at other people showing emotion, or is it respect, like holding back the whole game and literally taking the emotion out of football? And I think the way to do that and to grow the game and allow that emotion to flourish is to allow football to be what it naturally is, and not having home and away ends and takes all that away. It takes away from the spectacle. It takes away from the joy of watching the game. And to be honest, for me, if the worst price we've got to pay for away ends is a few people posting a snake emoji on Alex Greenwood's Instagram and her turning around and going, get over it, lads, it's 3 years ago now, then that's it. That's a price worth paying. And I think Alex Greenwood herself would say that's a price worth paying if it means that she can play in front of 20,000 people or more at the Etihad, stick one in front of a massed rank of Man United fans and just stand in front of them with their arms out. Sorry, I'm ranting again.
No, it's true. It's true, because there's nothing more than you'd love but to do that, because they've done it in the Championship. Like you say, Remy Ellen, they all done it. So, and that was when there was 50 people there, less than, and they love to do it. So, for me, it doesn't make sense, and especially as we were at City, and the way that they sort of set up our away end was horrendous. Like they gave us the away end, but then they were like, "Here's some tickets, but we're going to stop selling them now, and we're going to this." So this is why I do think if they are going to do it, you need to have it properly, set out and sort of regulated in that. Because I don't want, we'll just give them this just for the sake of it. No, you got to do it properly, and like you say, have that wall kind of thing. And obviously, you don't want more red there than blue, but you do want that kind of. I mean, Tom Gary talks about it in the picture he uses when Leslie Russo scored the header in versus thing, and there was just red, and there was people throwing their hands up and all that kind of stuff in the Conti Cup, and that's, he said, sort of like what you just said there, Paul. He said players know where to go. When Chelsea and Arsenal played, there was no way, and so they didn't know where their support was coming from. It was little pockets, and for me, I think what Rodney sort of said, the clubs, do they want it? I think they do want it. I think they're happy to have it. I think some clubs are not listening to the fans more than others, but I think majority of fans in the WSL now are for it, and I think we might not see it this year, but I think eventually we will see it. I think a lot of people are saying like Man United, Liverpool, Man United, Man City, obviously Man United, Chelsea. So I think we will see it. And then I think sort of when Man United do come, I think Leicester, they gave us an away end. Birmingham had it anyway. Reading, like I said, it was the worst away game we went to because they just didn't account for it. And next minute we were surrounded by Reading fans, and you know, Reading went 1-1 and we were getting V signs back for us, and I love it. I'm laughing, but then you say this is not the women's game, so what it obviously is because it was happening. So I don't know. I feel like people are cutting it onto it quick, and I feel like, you know, maybe at Reading they don't get a lot, but then when Man United come, they know they're going to get a lot. So you might as well just make those people feel comfortable when they do come, so they want to come back.
What about FA Cup away days as well? Like, for example, with Bridgewater, you know, you travel down to Bridgewater and packed an end at Bridgewater and still have 1,500 people the other end. But from my perspective, if Coventry get Man United away, and whether it be at LSV or the Dream Old Trafford, just so I can commentate at Old Trafford, but it's probably going to be LSV. I don't want to walk in there and get, oh, okay, we'll just go somewhere here. I want to walk in and see the wall of Man United flags at one end and go, right, okay, that's their territory. Coventry go the other end, and we scream at them for 90 minutes. That's when you're an away fan. Like, I remember someone saying in the Women's Football Collective chat, being a football away fan is like being a Viking raider. You go into enemy territory, you pack together, you show your flags, make a load of noise, and hopefully get out with 3 points. And if you get, you know, and I think people do go to see friends, and I think that it's important that we don't alienate those people, which is why we need the mixed, you know, you say the side stands, for example, are the neutral ends, mixed territory ends, and then you go, if you want to be in a packed, your own fans, you go this end or that end. Because we don't want to alienate the people who go to see their friends, but at the same time, more and more people are coming in, and they're not. And the football club is your identity; it's your town's identity. You're not. If you can't express that, or you feel you can't express it, it's going to take something away from it.
Where were you in 2018, mate? Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Sky is saying everything that I've been saying. But yeah, I love it because that's what it is. I mean, I saw a point, I don't know if she's still in here. Ellie was saying that before she came, she didn't really know anyone. And the way that the things are sold, it doesn't make it easy for new people coming in. And it's only when, you know, when she was sort of found by us and dragged into us, and then now she knows what she's doing, kind of thing. But, you know, I always wonder how many people are like sort of Ellie, never been before, want to be in the, you know, with a people, maybe doesn't want to stand right next to me and be shouting, but wants to feel that community togetherness, but doesn't know how to get it. And, you know, my Twitter or just Bar Miami Twitter can only reach out to so much, whereas I feel like the club should be pushing it more, should be saying this is it. And they are doing it. They are selling them when they can get them, they'll sell them themselves. But, you know, I feel like it has to come from the FA as well, and I feel like everyone has to get behind it because I do feel it'll grow it. And you know, it's been one way for a set way for a long time, and I just think if this is something that people are pushing, why do we want to ignore? Why do we want to ignore 37% of people? Why? I don't understand. Why do people want it to just be blanket? No, and I don't think a lot of people do. But I do think there is that fear, and I feel like you can't fear because it's not happened. You know, yes, there's a potential it might happen, but then we need to know within ourselves that we, you know, our community is strong enough to sort of not have it turn into whatever. And I just think that you need to believe in people. It's weird. I know what I'm saying. I'm going to wrap up, guys, because we've been going on. It's been an hour. It's been a bit of everything. But I'm just going to come to everyone for a final point. And thanks everyone for watching. Watch again, share it, like it. You know the drill. But Stuart, final point. Away fans, away ends, fans in general.
Away, well, I'll keep it to the topic and point that's in the title. Away fans would like it. It's not, they're not asking for something that's really difficult. You're asking for someone within the club to set something up on a website. They do it for the men's team, they can do it for the women's team. It's not that difficult. Do it. Like I said, you can't ignore a third of the people. If the third want it, the third do it. You don't have. You're not forcing someone to go and sit in the bear pit. Someone that wants to come as a neutral and just kind of take in a bit of both. You can have a general sale area. It's not difficult. It's not rocket science. It's also not applicable to every club, but at WSL, you certainly look at it. But then I would say that if you've got clubs need to be flexible enough and know what's happening. So if Portsmouth draw Man United in the FA Cup, there needs to be conversations between the clubs. Man United wouldn't say, we've actually got quite a dedicated fan base. They're going to be looking for away tickets. So when the tickets go on sale, you'll have to either put something on your website that they can go to as a designated area, or give us an allocation and we'll do it for you. It's not difficult. It's easily done. And if the simple thing is to say that actually here is your area to kind of stay, then you just make sure you get a couple of professional, trained stewards or security to be within there and just to kind of manage it responsibly. Because ultimately, if it's a big enough ground like Tottenham Hotspur Stadium or Arsenal Stadium, then you're going to have potentially police nearby. But I don't think that's ever really going to be an issue. The worst that's going to happen is you're going to hurt someone's feelings and they're going to go and tell everyone on Twitter. But conversation about what people find offensive is that's a big old debate. And I'll just say, look at, I think it's Ricky Gervais's second to most recent stand-up where he talks about offence. And I get the difficulty is if you're offended by Ricky Gervais, don't pay to go see Ricky Gervais. This is slightly different in football, but to have a general sale area where you can sit in the middle. And also, if you really, really don't like it, it's on telly now, so you're all right. That's my nutshell.
No.
It's a balance, isn't it? If people want it, give it to them. It's not. You're not asking for. It's not like you turn around saying, "I want VAR." Well, that's a bit trickier, and that's another debate. But if it's easily done, do it.
Oh,
You're on mute, Nat.
you're on mute, Nat. You muted yourself. She's on location.
She's moving.
She's moving.
Well, she's moving. What your thought, Rodney? What's yours?
Yeah. At the beginning, I have to be honest. I said I wasn't either for or against it. I believe. Oh, is it feedback? Is that me?
No, that'll be no.
I mean, I think it's down to the clubs whether they want it. I know that certain fans will want it, and the conversation I say is like 2 to 3 years ahead of its time. I don't know whether or not it's something that's going to be at the forefront of every team that has a big game coming up. You know, unless they actually they are told by the broadcasters that you need to have a dedicated end, because, you know, as Stuart has mentioned, you need to have staff on site to deal with a dedicated end, and most clubs are cash strapped. They are not necessarily flush with cash, and to have people working in the ground on a weekend at various times isn't always going to be the case where you get professionals or trained individuals. You're going to get volunteers, unfortunately, and it is what it is. I'm not for it. I'm not against it. I'm just not sure it's the most important thing right now. There you go.
Oh, no worries, Paul. Just your wrap up. What your thoughts?
I mean, Stu said a lot of it, so I won't repeat what he said about, it's fairly easy for clubs to do, and so there's no skin off their nose to do it. But I think it'd be doing a disservice to the game at this point not to do it, and it would almost be actively holding it back, not to at least offer the chance for people to form up. If they form up and it doesn't happen, and we're still here in 2 years, then fair enough. I'll come on something like this and say, well, maybe I was wrong about it, but I don't think I will be. I think it needs to happen.
No, 100%. And I just want to say thanks, guys, to everyone for tuning in. Sorry for my little technical difficulty at the end, but I think it was a good show. I think we had a lot of debate, and it ended up reaching out to places where we didn't think. But that's what it is about debate, isn't it? It goes in all directions. So yeah, tune in tomorrow though, because we're back with transfer news. So make sure you tune in for that one. But yeah, thanks guys, appreciate it. See you soon.